Tov. Okay. So today we're going to start Pasuk Zayin. So this Pasuk is Le'ilui Nishmat Shlomo ben Shoshana. Right? Hine mitato shel Shlomo 60 giborim saviv la migibore Yisrael. After and we're going to dive into the Pirush of the Gaon, and then we'll go back to the Pirush of the Malbim that we left off in last Shiur, which addresses this Pasuk as the influence, the nefesh, the heaviness of the physical nefesh of a human has on the neshama, and its influence is to hold on to the neshama and not let the neshama disconnect from the body and go to its source, to the Olam HaEmet. This is according to the Malbim. We just touched about it. We will get back to it, Be'ezrat Hashem, but I would like to focus on the Pirush of the Gaon Mivina on this pasuk and the following pasuk. Kulam achuze herev melumede milchama ish harbo al yerecho mipachad balelot. Okay. Hine mitato shel Shlomo. Here. Hine is here. It is right. Here it is. It's like almost a surprise. Hine, watch. How come? Almost like a how come. Yeah, it's a statement of surprise. Hine mitato shel Shlomo, the bed of Shlomo, and we will see what it refers to. Shishim giborim saviv la. There is 60 soldiers around it. Migiborei Israel, from the best soldiers of Am Israel, around the mita, around the bed of Shlomo. Kulam achuze herev. They all have their sword. Melumede milchama, very well taught. The war. Trained. Yeah, very well trained for war. They all have their sword on their thigh. From the fear of nights. Very good. The Gaon, in the pasuk before that pasuk, okay, in the pasuk Mizot Olam Min HaMidbar, we addressed that he was connecting to the 4 different fires, right, that we had in the Bet HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, the fire of the menorah, the fire of the Ketoret, the Levona, that was the fire that was on for the Shulchan, and the fire of the Mizbeach. And we explained how that basically represents the elevation, okay, the spiritual elevation and growth that Shlomo HaMelech had to do to be able to connect on a level of prophecy. And that's the statement, Mizot Olam Min HaMidbar. How is it possible to have such an elevation and growth from a level of desert all the way to a level of prophecy, of tremendous prophecy? So the answer, according to the Gaon Mivina, was that he was able to elevate himself, right, on an intellectual level, on a sensitive level, right, on a sacrifice level, and on an internalization level, right? And through those 4 mastering of strength and all those 4 different levels of elevation, he was ready to receive the prophecy. And obviously, at the end, as we know, prophecy doesn't depend on the prophet. It depends on whether HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses him, and that's Shlomo HaMelech at the time of the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Bet HaMikdash, right? Highest level possible. Says the Gaon, based on that, okay, Shlomo HaMelech continues and says, Hine mitato sheli Shlomo. He says the mitato sheli Shlomo, which represents the neshama. The mitat Shlomo represents the place of rest of Shlomo HaMelech, okay? Hine mitato sheli Shlomo. This Gaon is very, very long, very long. Shishim giborim savivla. There is 60 giborim around it. Says the Gaon Mivilna, this is referring to the 60 Chachamim of Sanhedrin. Although we know there is 70 Chachamim in Sanhedrin, so the Gaon addresses it right away. He says that you have 10 together, you have 2, 10, and 60. Okay, this is how the 72 in total are broken down. You have 2 that are the presidents, then you have 10 that are overlooking the 60. Okay, this is the structure. He says, the mitato sheli Shlomo, the greatness of Shlomo, his ma'ala, right? Which is representing the bina. The bina is the understanding davar mitoch davar. Is the nevonim. Anashim chachamim nevonim yodaim. So, hine mitato sheli Shlomo, the mitat Shlomo is the chokhmah Shlomo, is the da'at of Shlomo. Is his ability to get to where he got to. His level of accomplishment at that time. Hine mitato sheli Shlomo. That's the statement. He says, Shishim giborim savivla. The Shishim giborim represents the bina. So we have first the chokhmah, then we have the bina. Bina, the Gemara tells us, le'avin davar mitoch davar, is to learn something from something, to be able to deduct. Yeah? Deduction, understanding something from something. Mi Giborei Israel. Giborei Israel is the da'at, right? Is the actual da'at is the consolidation between knowledge and wisdom, and what you do with it. He says this is what we are talking about. He says how Shlomo HaMelech was able to elevate himself on those 4 levels and get to a place where he has in front of him the control over the chokhmah, the bina, and the da'at. This is what reflected after the 4 elevations that he was able to accomplish. The elevation on the chokhmah level, on a sensitive level, on a sacrifice level, and on an internalization of knowledge level, right? What it allowed to blossom is the chokhmah, the bina, and the da'at. Okay? Now, and we will get into it. And he says, what basically is the focal point around those 3 pillars of what we call the Mohin, the Moach, right? The head of the Adam HaKadmon, the head of the spiritual structure of man. You can refer to fundamentals of Emunah and how the Mohin are separated from the Chasadim, from the 7, you know, that we have the 10 Sefirot, the first 3 Sefirot, which represent the head, is the Chokhmah, the Bina, and the Da'at, right? We addressed that, the different parts of the brain. Okay. Says, what is the focal point and what is the purpose, says the Gaon Yudina, is the Emet. And here the Gaon zooms in the concept of Emet. He says, in order to understand why you need all 3 pillars, the Chokhmah, the Bina, and the Da'at, to connect or to reveal the Emet, and we're talking about the Chokhmah Shlomo, Mitato Sheli Shlomo. Mita is his bed, meaning this is his place of comfort. He got to a place of rest. He got to a place of satisfaction, a place where he is fully in control, natural, right? It's in his level of emet. Through the Chokhmah the Binah in Hadat, and he explains the following. He says, when you are a Dayan, okay? We say that Kol Dayan shedan din emet le'amito. That's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat. Every judge that judges the emet for each emet, okay? So he brings Geula la'olam. He brings closer Mashiach and the redemption to the world. So what does it mean to judge emet for the truth for its truth? The truth for its truth. So he says, the Tosfot says, because you have a truth that's not really the truth. What does that mean? He says, the truth can be the truth of the Torah, but not well applied to the situation. And then you can have the good assessment of the situation, the truth of the situation. You're assessing the situation according to the truth, the reality. However, you don't have the emet of the Torah. And sometimes your emet that you think is emet is not really emet, because it's not aligned with the emet of the Torah. So says the Gaon Mivilna, the collateral damage is terrible when you don't have the emet of the Torah that's in osmosis and harmony with the emet of the situation. Why? He says, because once, if you have the emet of the situation and you don't have the emet of the Torah, then you bring herev la'olam. You bring war to the world. Why? Because your assessment of the life, of the situation is not backed by the wisdom of the Torah.
Yeah. Wow.
And therefore will create a direction that will lead to sheker. Even though you understand the situation, Stanley, Haimi, Baruch Haba, I heard your voice. I love you. Even though you have the emet, you assess the situation the way it's supposed to be. But if you don't have the Torah to know what to do with it, it will yield wars. You bring saif la'olam, you bring herev la'olam. That is if you have the emet of the situation, but you don't have the emet of the Torah. And he supports this with Pesukim. Now, if you have the deed of the Torah, you have the emet of the Torah. You have the emet of the Torah. But you are not versed enough to understand life, to understand the situation. You have a lot of people, they can have very knowledgeable, but they cannot see the situation, the emet of the situation. So in that case, you bring Gehinam la'olam. You bring mahlokot, you bring mamash, darkness to the world. Why? He says because the Torah is called Etz HaChaim, and if you don't have Etz HaChaim, then you have the Gehinam. And what does that mean? He explains and says the following, that the wisdom of the Torah is here to enhance the behavior of people in the right direction. But if you cannot connect that Torah to the people, you basically allow the people to become animals, because you don't infuse in them the Ruach Hayim, the Etz HaChaim. And if you leave the world on an animalistic level, then all you have is you have a jungle. You have a jungle. And this chaos is called the Gehinam. The Gehinam is when there is the truth and you cannot have access to it. There is the truth. It's out there. There is no, it's like, to give an example, you have somebody, Lalo Alenu, he is begging to eat. There is a bank account that's full. There is access to food, there is access to everything, but he doesn't have access to it. It's there, but he doesn't know how to get to it. It's worse than not having anything. So says the Gaon Mivilna, that's another emet, that's not emet. So in order to be able to bring Gan Eden to the world, to bring life to the world, you need to be able to assess the situation according to the emet, have a proper understanding of the situation, and infuse the Torah properly to that situation. This is what the Gaon takes out from this pasuk. And he explains and says that Vahai le'olam, to be able to have life, to be able to live in this world and not generate machloket on one end or dead ends on another, which is the saif, the milhama, which is this. Right? You need to be able to have the chokhmah, bina, and the da'at working together on a human level and a spiritual level. And it's only once you do that that you're able to be'emet, v'hai le'olam, to live and experience and enjoy this world.
And just to be clear, that's the place that we're talking about that Shlomo achieved.
Yes, this is where Shlomo was. This is what, and
it's the resting place. That's what it means.
And we know that Shlomo was also Dayan. He was Dayan, Rosh Sanhedrin, right? He was, and we know the famous story with the two ladies that came with one baby, and they said, "This is mine and this is mine," and he took the sword and he was. Oh, where did that wisdom come from? Where did that clarity come from? Where did that shrewdness come from? Because he was working very hard to understand facts, human facts, nature, cause and effect of things clearly.
Practicality.
And only then he apply his Torah to that.
Rav, just a question on that. We know towards the end of the life of Shlomo, kind of what happens. I mean, how do you reach that point of complete emet and then?
That's a different story. That, by the way, nothing is given forever. Shlomo Moshe Rabbeinu bechvodo be'atzmo, we are taught that he lost all his chokhmah and he wasn't able to give halacha at the end of his time. He was sitting next to the chachamim and he was asked a question and didn't know the answer. The chokhmah, there is no level of achievement that is acquired forever. Never. You can reach the highest level. That doesn't mean you stay there at all. The opposite. It's more challenging than ever to hold on to something. Good?
Yes.
So now, these are the two factors. So we have Hine mitato sheli Shlomo. This is the place of Shlomo HaMelech that was filled with Chokhmah. Shishim Giborim Savivla is the Bina. Migiborei Yisrael is the Da'at. Right? And the Gaon explains that in order to be a good Dayan, and he refers to a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Kuftet Amud Bet, that says that if you are a Dayan and you give a psak din and you have a rabbi and you're not referring to your rabbi, your judgment is voided. Why? He says because a Dayan should have the fear of the Gehinam. What is Gehinam? Of the Sheker. He has to have the fear that Chas v'Shalom is going to give a psak that will create more bad than good. So he should never rely on his judgment and should always refer to a higher level, higher authority, or to the Sanhedrin itself in order to make sure that his psak, his assessment is right. So comes the Gaon Vilna and tells us a person, Shlomo HaMelech, he had within him 60 giborim, meaning he was rich. He would always ask himself and ask again and fight himself to make sure that when he was assessing or understanding the emet, he was really the emet.
So it's like 60 opinions of wisdom within his own head.
Within his own head.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd like one.
You get to one, right? You get to one. But if you're not challenging yourself constantly, if you're not able to see different facets of things, you might end up making mistakes that have detrimental collateral damage.
We learned that somewhere in Kohelet, that you're supposed to flip it upside down and see it from all angles.
Yeah. Continues the Gaon, and we have to continue with this pasuk. Kulam ahuzechem. So 1 second. So we have the Chokhmah, the Binah, and the Da'at. We have the two versions of incomplete emet, and then you have the obvious, the merger of the two emet that brings you to the real ultimate emet. And says the Gaon, there is a third element to that pasuk that we need to keep in mind, is the knowledge, the control of the knowledge. He says it's very important that the person has information at the tip of his fingers. You cannot be left with a void or not an answer that you cannot refer to quickly. So he says, in order to be able to have the emet of the Torah, have the emet of the reality, and bring them together, you must master information, intel. So you have access to it. You have the intel, not just access. You have the intel. You have the proper understanding of the intel and proper understanding of the situation. Together, it brings you to the emet. So, if you take, on a very layman level, but if we apply this to a day-to-day thing, let's say you want to do a due diligence on an opportunity. You want to have the exact facts on the opportunity. You have to understand, you have to master the knowledge of what's around that opportunity, right? And be able to bring all this together to see if the opportunity is worth it or not. Because if you're missing one of the three, if you don't have the proper knowledge, if you don't have the right information, and if you're not honest about that information, and you stick to your own belief of the situation, then you might end up making a tremendous mistake. So the secret to reveal the emet on every opportunity or situation that we're in is to combine all these three together, essentially as behavioral as possible in your life, and if not, at least for big decisions. And always, like the Gaon says, have the humility and the fear of failure to go and ask. Ask. Always. You can make your decision, but at least you need to ask. This is another element to the beracha or that is called emet, that we can have access to. Then the Gaon continues in the next pasuk, and they're tied together. He says, "Kulam achuze herev." They all have holding on to the sword. Melumede milhama, extremely well trained for war. Ish harbo al yerecho, they all have their own sword on their thigh. Mitpahal balelot, from the fear of night. So says the Gaon the following. Kulam achuzer herev is mastering knowledge. Kulam achuzer herev, they all hold on to their herev, to their sword. What does it mean to hold on to your sword? It means to master the knowledge and information, which means you have to absorb information, have the awareness of what you are absorbing, and have the wisdom to categorize it, compartmentalize it properly, so that at all points you have access to it.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I missed the beginning. I was writing.
You have to be able to absorb information, have the awareness of what you are absorbing, understand it, organize it, and compartmentalize it in your brain so that you can have access to it at all times. This is mastering information. This is kulam achuze herev. This is Shlomo HaMelech. Now we are swimming in the brain of Shlomo HaMelech. Number one, mastering information. So when you read the book, when you hear a lesson, when you learn Torah, when you hear something new, very important. Okay, what did I learn? What is the information? What do I learn from this information? How can I store it in my brain with a keyword that I can have access to right away? And what is it? In what compartment in my head is it? Is it for my Shalom Bayit? Is it for my business? Is it for my relationship with my business? Is it for the chinuch of my kids? Is it going to help me when I learn Torah, when I pray? And give yourself a keyword. I know the information, what I've learned from that information, a keyword to have access to that information. Good? Mm-hmm. Okay. And this we should do at all time, all the time. Because we constantly absorbing more and more information and more knowledge. And it's coming randomly usually, right? You hear from someone out of the blue, a great sentence or whatever. Absorb. Yeah.
Isn't there something in Pirkei Avot about the three different kinds of ways to absorb knowledge, like a sifter that takes in?
There are three types of people. Yes. But these are three different types of people.
Yes.
Of Talmidei Chachamim. Yeah, this is different. Here we're talking about the process of achuze herev, of the access to information,
right.
Knowledge, intel. That's kulam achuze herev. Melumede bilhama, experience, training. Someone that is extremely comfortable with life, understands people, understands situation, knows how to deal. Experience.
Through life experience.
Not through, no, it's different. Yes, it's pashut experience, understanding the world, being worldly, different opinions, different mentalities, different cultures, behaviors, human connection. It's a different art, right? Complete different trait. So this is the first one is the menorah, the esh of the menorah. Now we are talking about the esh of the ketoret, the senses. Ish harvo al yerecho, meaning it's not only potential, but it's things that it's the practice, implementation. It's one thing to be a walking dictionary, but if you don't know how to apply it, what is it worth? So this is ish harbo al yerecho. It's on your thigh, you know. You're holding that. You're carrying it all the time. You're applying it. So, third lesson Shlomo HaMelech is teaching us to swim in the Emet, to understand the Emet, to connect to the Emet, is when you learn something, find a way to practice it.
It's not enough just to know the knowledge. You have to actually do something with it.
Implement, use it. Create an opportunity to taste it, to face it like a proof of concept. Mipahad balelot, from the fear of night, says the Gaon Mivilna, this is fear, humility, fearing that it's at the end it's sheker, that you misunderstood, that you're wrong. Humility. The fear of the light. Night represents Gehinnom, represents darkness, confusion, mistake, failure. You need to fear the failure. You need to fear the mistake. And that fear is the humility you need to check yourself and make sure that what you did is right by asking, by checking.
Rob, can you go back to number 2 about the experience? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that one about Milumidei Milchama.
Milumidei Milchama, yes.
Can you just explain it one more time about the experience?
Oh, the words that Shlomo HaMelech used, Beki'im beYishuvo shel Olam, they are experienced in the Yishuv HaOlam, in the harmony of humanity. What does that mean? It's to understand that the language of each individual, to understand the emotions of people, their background. And
what's the lesson in it that you learn? That you should try and
very important. You remember the story of the king that sends his son on a journey, and the son that sends the letters to his father for more money and more money and more money, until the day that the king didn't know how to read. He had somebody reading it for it, and then he goes to a lady, and she's, remember that story? This is the point. The point is that not there's not one universal way of saying things. You can have two people that come with the same exact question, with the same exact background. For one, we might say yes, and for the other, we might say no. It's not enough to know the halacha. It's important to understand how do you apply it to the situation and who it affects.
I got it now.
And in order to do that, you need to feel people. You need to understand them. You need to read their body language, understand their circumstances, understand their background. all the impact it will have, and decide whether or not he should or should not do something. This is Beki'im B'yishuvo Shel Olam. How do you bring the Torah and allow the Torah to bring shalom? Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. It's not enough to bring Torah. The Torah has to have an impact of shalom. And if you are a robot, or if you are insensitive, or you don't have the melumedei milchama within you, you cannot bring shalom ba'olam. So you need to have, and again, it's parallel to the lesson of Shlomo HaMelech from last shiur. You have the mastering of information. You have the mastering of sensitivity and human connection, what we call being street smart. Yeah. Then you have the implementation, what you take from it, how you implement it in your life. And finally, the humility and the fear, which is the sacrifice of what you should not do, what you should not behave. This is what Shlomo HaMelech is coming to teach us. So the Gaon then takes all this and says, those four elements in an essence of an individual, with the Chokhmah, Bina, and the Da'at, Chachamim, Nevonim, Ve'yod'im, that Moshe Rabbeinu picked for the Mishkan, right? And the people to represent him in Am Yisrael, is what was breathing and living inside Shlomo HaMelech to allow him to bring the emet of the Torah, the emet of a situation together to yield the ultimate emet. So essentially, if we have to implement the fear of night into the equation, we have to ask ourselves, do I really understand the information that's in front of me, the Torah? Did I really understand the halakha properly? Or I misunderstood it? Very important to understand the halakha, to understand the Torah, to understand the message properly. Number two, do I understand the situation that's in front of me? Do I have all the facts clear? Now, is it me, my emet, that I want to bring out? Or am I working on the emet? These are the questions I have to ask myself all the time. Is it a theory or is it something I can apply? Because by applying your knowledge, by applying your theories and you will know if it's easy, it's difficult, what it implies. We talk about keeping Shabbat, for example. Yeah, very good, keeping Shabbat. But somebody that knows all the halachot of Shabbat and never did Shabbat, does he know how this can affect his Shalom Bayit, the chinuch of his kids, socially, how people are going to see him? Yeah? We're in the kippah. It's the same thing, all the impacts, not only from a halachic level. And then, when you have all this, you realize, Shabbat Kodesh, you know what? At the end, it helps with my Shalom Bayit. I can communicate with my wife. I can listen to my kids. I rest. I disconnect from the pressure of the day-to-day world. I'm able to learn. I'm able to absorb. I connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu better. My body rests. It's worth it. It's worth it. There's constraints. There's this. That. But at the end, you can weigh the pros and cons and say, you know what? It's worth it. And if you control all this, and you need to influence someone or a situation, you will know based on your experience on what aspect you want to emphasize and what you should not emphasize. If you need to convey a point. Because if you emphasize on the wrong point, even though it's emet, you might break the person, you might create a problem. We're reaching now, Shlomo Melech reveals to us how he operates as Shelomo. And the Gaon brings that to us on a golden platter and shows us. Now, again, if you see how extremely systematic the Gaon is, that just shows you where the Gaon himself was. Because in order to say what he says and see what he sees in Shir HaMelech, he had to be there in his own level. He had to be there. And it's only through the practice, through the knowledge, that we can actually get there. And this is a Apirion Asalo HaMelech Shlomo Me'atzeh HaLevanon, which we'll get to the outcome of it. This is the Gaon Mivilna. This is the Gaon Mivilna. A journey in the mitato shel Shlomo, in the greatness of Shlomo HaMelech.
Rav, how? I mean, obviously, we're talking about very, very big tzaddikim, but how does somebody like the Gaon extract this kind of lesson from these words? I mean,
because he was living it. He was living it. That's why he's called the Gaon. You don't have too many Chachamim across history that are called the Gaon.
What does the word Gaon mean?
Gaon, the genius. I mean, the Gaon knew the entire Torah, Kabbalah, anything. There's not one portion of the Torah that he didn't master. I mean, he was able to read the Torah upside down, from back to front, when he was 3 or 5 years old.
Oh my God!
By heart. Yeah. No, but that's the guy. That's the man. That's the man that mastered music and could kill someone with a few strings. No, yeah, you have to understand that the Gaon Mivilna, this is not it's like when I talk about the Rambam. The Rambam says certain things about Moshe Rabbeinu in his Pirush HaMishnayot on Sanhedrin, on the Yud Gimel Ikarei Torah, okay? And he addressed something about Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's the Rambam that you have to understand, the Rambam, okay? You can only say something like this if you live it. You cannot bring something to life and say it and write it and be clear about it if you did not experience it. It's not possible. So what the Gaon is telling us is writing and he's understanding. And by the way, we're only explaining the Gaon, but he understood it from the words of Shlomo HaMelech in Shir HaShirim that we read every Friday and we don't understand. We sing it. Hey, we sing it and it's beautiful, right? It's amazing. Do we understand that this is what we're saying? We're swimming inside the neurons of Shlomo HaMelech and understanding who Shlomo HaMelech and why Shlomo HaMelech is so known because of this practice. Now we see it.
So now, is that the solution to meaningful prayer?
100%. Listen to me, Tzaddik, it's very simple. I can assure you, you will never say Hine mitato shel Shlomo the same way again in your life. It's not possible unless you're completely insensitive to it and you don't care and it's an hour of great time and you move on. But
then we have bigger problem.
Well, yeah, exactly. But if we internalize it properly and the way we are, finish. You say Hine mitato shel Shlomo. We understand what Hine mitato shel Shlomo. 60 גיבורים סביב לה, what it represents מגיבורי ישראל, כולם אחוזי חרב, מלומדים מלחמה. And now you understand also why the Mekubalim and the Chachamim, when they pray, it takes longer. It's not 30 minutes.
Because they feel it. They
feel
feel
it. They experience it. It's different. It's different. Now take this and expand it across the tefillah. That's Mekubalim. That's why when they say Shemona Esrei, they could say Shemona Esrei for 30 minutes. That's 30 minutes, because they dance, they swim, they experience, and
So the actual words of the Amidah, they're swimming within it.
Yeah, they're experiencing, they're feeling it.
Exactly. So when you tell someone, look, quick, I need to be in and out 30 minutes. So, put this and see what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at this behavior. It's like you come, this diamond, the most amazing experience, and you're like, you know what? Leave me alone. Let me go back to play Sheshbesh.
It's in Shema. I mean, Ve'ahavta, it has to be with your heart. Otherwise, it's worthless.
Nachon. But that's only the word Ve'ahavta. If we dive into the Ve'ahavta of the Torah, it's another Ve'ahavta.
All right, put it on the to-do list, Rav.
Because Baruch Hu just give us health and strength.
Amen.
So now we understand and we have to take this now, internalize it, reflect it, and see how I can implement it. And practical behavior, bring it to your life, implement, test it. By testing it, you will see, did I understand it? I did not understand it. This is easy. This is difficult. Where am I good at? Where am I weak at? It becomes yours. It becomes your own Torah. It becomes you. It's not the Gaon Mivilna anymore. It's not Shlomo HaMelech anymore. It's you. It's you. And we waste our time. We waste our time. All this knowledge. Well, Be'ezrat Hashem. I'm sorry, I'm too passionate.
No, it's I love it.
It drives it home.
I love it. Thank you, Rav.
Yes, thank you.
Well, what, Andy?
The fear of Hashem, the fear of the night.
Yes.
That's the only place where at night the physical energy, it's in the reproductive organ.
Yes.
It's the only
Rambam.
at night.
Huh?
It says
I
that,
hear. Yeah, okay. He says that.
it says that at night, when the organs feel that the neshama wants to live, the only place that there is constant energy in the body, it's in the reproductive organ.
Yeah, okay.
Why? And only on that we stay alive. It is in a commentary.
Which commentary?
I send it to you on a picture.
Yeah,
later.
I want to see it. Now, this is the Rambam. The Rambam, if you follow the 8 chapters of the Rambam says at night the body takes control, just so that it empowers itself, just so that it can hold on to whatever is left of the neshama inside the body. And the reproduction is because this is what stimulates a person to a level that he doesn't want to let go. So that subconsciously, that stimulation allows the body to hold on to the neshama because of it's a counterbalance.
Spectacular.
Baruch Hashem.
Oh, Hashem.
Thank you, Rav.
Beautiful.
Have a
Love you
beautiful
all.
day.
You too.
Bye,
Thank you so
Andy.
much.
Bye-bye. See you.